Good morning to everyone tuning in live from the East Coast of the US, and good day to everyone around the world, no matter what time it is for you. My name is Josh Epstein. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Aris Corporation. It's my pleasure to be moderating this panel discussion today. This is a part of our series that we call Pulling the Digital Thread, where we explore trending topics and technologies that are shaping digital engineering, digital manufacturing, product lifecycle management, and digital enterprise, all from the perspective of this connected digital thread. So our goal here is to bring together some really smart, independent thinkers from around the world to exchange ideas and hopefully have a little bit of fun while we do it. Today we are streaming on a delay, so we make sure we get good high quality audio. So while we're not answering questions live, we do encourage everyone to participate by posting questions or comments on LinkedIn. If you use the hashtag pulling the digital thread in your posts, our speakers here and the Aris team will be online and we'll keep the conversation going on LinkedIn. So this discussion will be available on demand after the event if you're not able to stay through its entirety. So let's dig in. Today, we're going to talk about really what we'll call config to order, but we'll also maybe sort of explore other better, more descriptive terms. But really, this idea of configure to order is a trending topic. I mean, it has been for years, but now as the growing demand for personalized goods and faster time to market, is becoming all the more important. There's a lot of attention towards modular design and around automating workflows that support modular design and config to order. As the world looks towards a new class of PLM solutions, of digital thread solutions, and of really embracing the potential for AI and cloud-based collaboration, it's a good time to have this conversation. So I'm joined today by three leading thinkers in this space. We have Tom Gill from SimData, who's I think a fellow New Englander based in New Hampshire. We've got Johan Kallgren from Modular Management from Sweden, and Professor Matthias Kreimeier from the University of Stuttgart in Germany. So I guess just to start out, I'll maybe ask each to give a little more expanded introduction of yourself, of your organization or your organizations that you work with, and really kind of why you have an interest in this particular subject. Tom, let me start with you.
All right. Thanks, Josh. So Tom Gill, I work for a company called SimData. We're a boutique global management consulting firm that focuses solely on PLM. We work as market analysts. We provide education to the industry, but the biggest part of our business is consulting. We consult both for industrial companies and for software and service providers, but we don't sell and implement software. As far as myself, I'm a mechanical engineer. I did some work in machinery companies doing machine design early on, and then started managing CAD software, customizing it and so forth. Took a little side trip and did some simulation using finite element analysis, and eventually evolved to implement PLM at a tier 1 automotive supplier, and ran that group for about 15 years. In 2010, I came to work for SimData, and since that time, I'm kind of a generalist here. I work both with solution providers and with industrial companies, helping them develop strategies and ensuring those strategies get implemented. And then I move beyond automotive and machinery into most other industries, process industry, A&D, consumer, and high tech. As far as configurators, what we're seeing is there's a lot of growth, at least growth and interest in leveraging out-of-the-box configurator technology across all industries. It's a proven way you can increase the addressable market for your products without starting from scratch. You can leverage existing designs and adjust them. That said, to fully leverage it, you really need a strategy. You have to have the products properly architected, and then the related organizations within your company, from portfolio management through manufacturing and service, all to be aligned to really be able to leverage a configure to order business. Why do I find it interesting? I'm an engineer, I'm a problem solver, and leveraging CTO is a good way to solve a lot of business problems in companies.
Excellent. Well, glad to have you here, Tom. Johan, let's go to you.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. My name is Johan Kellgren. I'm with a company called Modular Management, and I'm the executive vice president there on the group level. And I've been working with model management for 25 years now in different capacities. For instance, I started and ran our US operations between 2003 and 2009. So we have our headquarters in the US in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Probably a very cool place by now, but model management, I can also say that I grew up within the home appliance industry. I worked with advanced product development for Electrolux 10 years before that. So that's, in a nutshell, my career. Model management is a company that for the last 30 years been working with clients, helping them to develop configurable product families based on modular systems. And back then, let's say 30, 20 years ago, it was a lot about the modular systems themselves. But more and more, as automation, digitalization has come into play, the notion of how you breathe life into those modular systems by configuration, back and front end, is getting ever and ever more important. As you know, we all know that productivity, competitiveness needs to be higher to compete in this world. So that is something that we worked quite a lot on the last years now to actually, based on the modular systems, move into a configure-to-order process, for instance, to enable that. So I'm really enjoying to talk about that subject today. Thank you.
Great. Well, welcome. Matt, let's go to you.
Well, hi everybody. My name is Matthias Kreimeier originally, actually, but I guess the German name makes it a bit different. I am German by origin. I can do the German accent if you want to, but I'll stay with this. I worked in industry for about 12 years. I'm now in university. Today I run an institute that does research on engineering design. So essentially we look at how does a designer work? How can you make a design process efficient? How can you make it innovative? How you can make it creative? There's lots of challenges that come in nowadays. Think of agility, think of all kinds of new integration, cyber physical products and all of that. With my heart in the industry, though, my background is certainly one more of a practitioner. So that's sort of my connection to this topic. I used to work in truck industry. It's kind of hard to overlook on my left and my right in the background, actually. And I love trucks, to be honest. It's a fun product. They're wonderfully complex. It's a wonderfully small market. So the only way of leveraging it or of making a business work is by developing very little and make it available in a large variety. And that's where the modular product comes in. So what I did in my previous life in industry is I worked for MAN Truck and Bus, one of the major manufacturers in Europe. And I implemented a modular system for the company. I was the lead architect in R&D. I was head of PLM and PLM implementation for many years. And we implemented a PLM solution to make that happen in terms of documentation, in terms of release processes, in terms of all that comes as technicalities and methods, down to sales and all the while. And later then I ran product planning, product management. So I kind of did the inverse of going the downstream process and actually had to look into how to make a portfolio and how to manage a portfolio, which I think is quite essential in this context. And today I still do research in that. I try to sort of reunite how you do sort of modular design on the one hand and systems engineering on the other hand. And often that's quite a contradiction because in systems engineering, you kind of work along one stream of functions and one system as such. And the modular approach kind of not the right angle to look at that. So that's my research interest. And I guess that's what brings me here.
This is great. This is like the perfect panel, I think, to have this conversation. We're coming at it from both academic, from practitioner, from consultative, as well as across industry, because this clearly is not just about large industrial equipment. This spans consumer packaged goods, consumer electronics, and the like. So, Johan, let's start with a very basic question. We wouldn't be talking about this if this was easy. right? So what exactly about moving a business towards a more modular approach or a configure to order business model is such a hard problem to solve?
Well, starting off, I mean, if you have an engineering to order process today, I mean, you don't have it for the fun of it. You have it because you have to adopt your product designs for various customer needs and applications and such. And so, in order to go to a configure to order process or business model, there has to be some type of product definition that is made that entails perhaps re-engineering, different types of aspects of actually working with your hardware or software for that matter. So it's not as simple as simply use a smart digital solution and then you have your configure to order process. I mean, I guess maybe I shouldn't say that here, but it actually
You
is a
should.
product definition in bottom of it that needs to be done. Actually, going to those creating configurable product families based on modular platforms, and this can be done easy or it can be tough, depending on what type of hardware it is, depending on your ambitions levels and so on. But sometimes it can be as simple as organize your existing product structures in an ad hoc modular system. Sometimes it has to, entail some re-engineering. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, of course, that in order to do a real effective configure to order process, you have to have a digital support for this process because the process flows across many different company functions. I mean, we talk about sales, engineering, sourcing, manufacturing, for instance. And all these company functions have their stakeholders with their functional requirements that should be supported. And to do that, as we all know, is to connect the enterprise landscape of today into what we coin as the digital thread. I believe you have the term here, pulling the digital thread, as your theme for those different webinars that we're doing right now. And this can, of course, be done, but it also entails competence and resources to do it, and have, in our opinion, also a unified information model that is a language that we all can understand across different enterprise systems, across the value chain. So that's the second thing. And the third thing I would say is that it's also a new way of working. It's hard to change the way of working. It's hard to change the culture in the company. If you used to do engineering to order, always optimize each project per that customer's desires, so to speak, it takes some explanation, motivation to change that behavior. And it requires some pretty good facts on the table, and sometimes they're hard to get by. And that makes companies hesitate to make this move.
No, yeah, we'll maybe turn towards the kind of cultural and process-oriented subject in a minute. Because I'm sure that's a monumental challenge. But on the subject maybe of technology and on, I'm sure that I can only imagine the amount of information engineering that needs to happen in the background. But maybe just to set the stage, Tom, I know you've done a lot of research on the technology. You've been very helpful to us at Eris, kind of sculpting a view of how different organizations think about the role of technology. But could you maybe just start with a quick overview of what is the role of technology in software infrastructure in supporting this transformation? And as folks are maybe looking at different types of tooling or of infrastructure, where should they start?
Well, understand your business requirements is probably the first thing you need to do. I think I'll spin the question a little bit and talk about the trends. What we're starting to see is materializes the trend to cloud and SaaS. It's starting to hit its stride. And we've got a simple model that we use to categorize PLM solutions. Occasionally we call it above the line, below the line. So above the line are simple systems that focus on BOM and change management. In the cloud world, things like the original Arena software. And we say above the line because it focuses on BOM and change, but not the deep manufacturing requirements. Below the line covers above the line but it also is able to support deep manufacturing. A tool like Aris does that, and some of the big competitors that you have. So it covers end-to-end processes, CAD integrations, multi-BOM management, and so on. One of the trends that we're seeing is people are moving to SaaS and cloud-based SaaS. And for the below the line companies, it's a migration. You have to refactor your code and so that you're able to leverage cloud scalability, elasticity, telematics, and some of those advanced technologies. We're starting to see those tools roll out over the last couple of years. Adoptions and migrations are starting to happen. Personally, I like that migration approach because it shows a commitment to the customer that you're going to bring the data forward, because PLM technology has a very long life cycle in companies. When you pick a tool, you're going to be using it for a long time. On the software side, it's a bit different. The migration can be quite hard. There's lots of integrations, lots of interdependencies as you move to cloud. Being able to bring forward your legacy environments, which have a lot of development in them, can be hard, even with a below-the-line solution. Aris is one tool that does that quite well. Historically, moving into config to order, a lot of it's been done independent of PLM. The configurator front end tends to manipulate BOMs from ERP. There's a lot of custom code. And then there were independent efforts in sales that would generate a configuration, but the rules generally weren't in agreement across the enterprise. So it was really hard to sync rules, and you could end up configuring things that either you couldn't sell or shouldn't sell or couldn't make. And as the technology moves forward, we're getting configuration technology that can be applied not just to EBOMs, but across the whole life cycle. The configuration rules are independent of the structure underneath it, so they can be reused and commonized from sales through engineering, manufacturing, and service. The other big point that we're seeing is interest in adoption of modular design strategies. So having Johan here is great, because they really understand the reality of what it takes to get a product formulated to be able to support a modular strategy. As far as implementing, as I said, the big thing is to understand your business requirements. And it's not just picking technology. You've got to have a vision for your company, the strategy, which can be a config to order strategy, but then how you implement it. You have to have your product architecture in place and a plan to get your whole organization oriented around that.
Maybe I'm really curious to get Johan's take on this, but maybe before we do that, both Johan and Matt on the technology elements, but also the culture elements. Matt, maybe, as someone who, a long run at MAN, sort of seeing this unfold, can you maybe tell us from a practitioner standpoint how you saw this unfold over time?
I think the basic word here is it's a learning curve, and that's kind of this positive euphemist term of, well, you don't know, and then it kind of works more, and then you make it work some more, right? And I think that's something that a company has to actively embrace, that actually it doesn't work right away, and you can, of course, unpack something. Tom, you said you can leverage some basic modular configuration, but then you really need to go into modular design. You need to adopt processes. You need to sort of weave it more into the company's texture. So it's quite a complex undertaking. Looking back at doing that for 10 years, I think the best thing that we did is actually take an academic approach. And I'm not saying that because I work in that field now, but we spoke for a long time as a company about an information model and about the business need. How much modularity is needed? Is there also engineer to order outside the configure to order? There's always mixed forms. The world is never black and white. So we spent almost 2 years on formulating a sort of approach on how the information is needed, plus something we didn't have in your both initial statements of how much modularity or how much configuration do you really need. I mean, you can go down into every detail, but then you have death by information complexity. So we built a lot of prototypes along the way at the time for almost another 2 years then to test these theories or this model. We started out with sort of something that was programmed in C++, then we went to something like Excel XS, and then we went on actually into an ARIS environment to start with because it's such a nice open-minded platform and so on. So I think it needs that. So why I'm starting sort of from this high level point of view, I think PLM, if you do it and if you do configure to order, either because your product was modular or because you want to be modular, embeds a lot of how does a company work as its heart, what philosophy is in engineering. And that was a strong or interesting learning for me, that this philosophy that is, how is your product cut up into pieces? What's the product decomposition or the product structure? That's really how engineers think. And many don't have this abstract mind of understanding why PLM is like it is and all these complex functions and why therefore the modularity is so complex. They say, well, I did this and I can combine it here and that's it. So I think understanding what it involves, that's really what makes a company then either successful or not in very abstract terms. And I'll be happy to elaborate another 2 hours.
Yeah, Jan, I'm curious just on your reaction to that as someone who's consulted on lots of these projects. How do you see it? And I think I could try to pick out the three elements. There's the tech, which I very interested in kind of what the role of technology solutions. There's the information model and that hard work of kind of envisioning kind of that, and then there's just the people, process, culture element. So how do you go about organizing projects here and kind of advising companies?
Well, to start with, it is a project, or even we call it a program actually, because it's a cross-functional, multifunctional endeavor typically. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's always this enormous program. It can also be a fairly short-term project depending on your goals. But if you think about it as a program, it entails all these different company functions. And of course, it is an investment. And as an investment, you have to talk to the C-suite to get the mandate and the sponsorship to get going with this. And in our experience, without having that sponsorship and mandate and having a solid business case on the table to justify this investment over time, it's very difficult to reach the full benefit of a, so to say, modular program that will then lead into actually having a configure to order business process at the end of the day. And so from our point of view, we need to work with the C-suite. We need to formulate a solid business case. There has to be a return on investment calculation on the table, and that can be done in, hundreds of ways, of course, but at the end of the day, when it's configured to order, is to monetize those things, those benefits that you see from configured to order, which is obviously, hopefully, it's much less effort to deliver something. It goes faster, and it's not so error prone. I mean, basically, you have weeded out all the quality problems in the supply chain, and of course, not in engineering in problems when you do ad hoc engineering, order engineering. So. Monetizing those, and also to be able to quantify the effort upfront in terms of what the manpower, the cost associated with this program execution, and then you have your ROI calculation there. That is really important. And then after that, if you get the go, of course, you have to man the program with a core team, a cross-functional core team, and very importantly, you need to have a dedicated project manager or program manager. And again, this is why executive sponsorship is so important, because this core team has to have the mandate to actually spend a significant time of their work hours on this project as it goes along. Because if you just try to do this with your left hand, you have your regular work somewhere else. It's a painful experience in our experience. It has to be a focused effort. It can be large, it can be small, but it has to be focused.
I'm interested in another perspective on the value drivers here. Matt, Tom, what are the key business value that comes out of these projects?
I have one thing, maybe if I may jump in first, that I slightly disagree, let's say, and that is I think doing a business case is very important because it's the consensus or not consensus you get in the company, and that is an active process of finding your strategy and breaking it down to what you want to do. I do think, however, when you're at that beginning of that journey, often you don't know what it entails. All the complexities that we won't be able to wrap up in this 1 hour that we have or whatever it is. So I think if you do a strategy towards configure to order or modular products, I think you need to be very honest with yourself as a company of how much modularity you have, how much you need. That's the question in the end that I was bringing up before. And when I look back to my own time, that was sort of 10, 12 years ago, and I think it's fair enough to say that now. We had a business case, it was fair enough, but it was by far not complete or really solid in every detail and aspect. But the company believed in it, and the company worked in a modular manner already, just that it was very messy. And this messiness would have led to some kind of, I call it death by complexity at times anyways. So even if there had not been a business case, had there not been a project to do a clean modular approach, it would still have led to nothing. So the business case is kind of one line. If you don't do this, you're done. And I think that's kind of the other side of that discussion and strategy, that if you believe you need it anyways, then it's fair enough to start. And Tom, I think this is a hand over to you. You were saying sometimes companies just leverage what they have without going fully blown. And I think that's a fair start.
Okay, I'll jump in then.
Please.
And sort of echo off your comments, Matthias. I'm pragmatic, and absolutely to get the most benefit, the strategic plan is the way to go forward with a formal business case. But in order to get support, it's not always easy to come forward with a big plan. So doing some, I don't know if it's quite skunkworks level, but maybe work group level, trials, prototypes, you can get some benefits at the work group level by just modularizing a piece of your design. Maybe could be in manufacturing. It doesn't have to be in the product. And use those successes as part of your bigger plan. I think getting support for the big plan, the business case is important. You've got to have numbers that show value, but the sale is made with persuasion.
Yeah.
And then you have the numbers to back it up. I think you got to have a business case. It's got to make sense, but the business case alone is not just because it gets you a 18% ROI. You're not necessarily going to get approval for it. So developing a persuasive pitch to your executives that convinces them of the strategy going forward tends to be more successful in our experience.
Just to comment on that then, would be that we talk about, in the general case, the importance of different ways of getting this done or getting this started. And one dimension that we also should bring into this is the business to consumer or business to business aspect. And if you have a business to consumer aspect, where you usually have those big companies with next generation, large investment, complicated tool manufacturing and all that. So in those cases, you just have to have a business case to get going. I mean, but it's more when it comes to the business to business, when you have project based, like the Mittelstand companies in Germany, for instance, that I totally agree that you can be much more pragmatic and get started and show, in how much easier it is to do this portion of a project to deliver whatever a packaging machine or so by working in a modular and configurable way, and kind of gain momentum that way as well. So I don't want to be dogmatic here. Both approaches are good in the right situation, so to speak.
Totally, fully agree.
Yeah. Understanding your vision and understanding requirements.
Right.
If I could push it all just a little bit more to really start naming some of the specific, both maybe value drivers, both from maybe increasing the top line as well as sort of the efficiency. Am I right that it seems intuitive that if you can offer a more personalized experience, you have the ability to monetize and actually monetize some of that specialty or that personalized experience. But what are other kind of drivers either for, increased revenue or actually just reducing operational costs?
I would say it's so looking back at my own experience maybe, and that is sort of a starting point because it's a single file view really. I think it's probably mostly a combination of both. I've seen a lot of companies who say, well, we have all this development done, but actually we only sell part of it, and we probably could more, but we don't really know. And then this sort of Lego principle that's often suspected, but that is not as Lego-y as you think. So that is increasing top line often. However, it also comes with increased efforts in sales and such. So there's a certain limit. I would argue it's a curve that sort of flattens out. The more products you push out, you get this long tail phenomenon to be even more painful. On the other hand, I do think if you do modularity right, you decrease internal cost at a first point, just because it's a smoother process throughout the company. So you have this life cycle aspect that comes up. And secondly, if you do modularization right as a technology, you have an economy of scale that is not necessarily purchasing more stuff for a lower price, but R&Ding less for more products. And if I look back at our trucks at the time, we had a number that we reduced about 15% of the part numbers without reducing any of the portfolio. And then in a second step, actually, with those same parts that we had, we could even widen up the portfolio. And personally, I think from an academic point of view, today, that is a wonderful validation where you say, hey, case solved. We actually, with less, we did more. That might have paid off.
Yeah, I can just, build on that, Matthias, and say that, many times modularization programs are motivated by cost reductions, but really the most interesting thing is to have agile, flexible assortments that make you compete and win in the marketplace. Because you sell more with higher margins, and that is, when you run those business cases again, that's actually where the big value is, rather than, you cost yourself to death, really, if you're not careful. And but a big part of, if we talk about the configure to order process here, is this what we call the complexity cost that is hidden in the value stream to just manage all this kind of semi-chaotic order engineering exercise that you embark on. And without knowing that cost of complexity, it's really hard to do informed data-driven decisions to optimize your decisions, both in product engineering, in how you engineer your supply chain and so on. But if you have the cost of complexity contrast to your direct costs, then you can actually get to those part number reductions that Matthias was talking about. You can actually justify the fact that you can take out maybe 50-60% of the active part numbers in the value stream. Perhaps you sometimes see a little bit of how do you say, punishment on the direct material side, but the cost of complexity is so much greater, the reduction of cost of complexity. But if you don't aware of that cost of complexity, it's hard to make those type of optimized decisions.
Yeah.
Not saying that direct material reduction is not important, because at the end of the day, it's really the majority of the cost for most products. So you can never lose track of that, but you should also figure out the cost of complexity.
And here's just to jump in on that. That's why I was being so critical before, because I would argue 80% of those companies out there don't know their own cost of complexity. They say, we have a module and it can be combined, but already if you ask them, so how often do you test this part against all other combinations? How high is your cost in physical testing, for example? They say, we do it at times, but they're not aware that that's a complexity cost. And that sort of increases rapidly or exponentially with modularity.
Well, how about as you extend it out into the service lifecycle? I'm curious, how modular management and kind of simplifying your configuration. How does that? I have to imagine there's benefits in the service chain as well, right?
Absolutely. Fundamentally, if you have less unique parts in your product, you have less spare parts to worry about in your installed base. Just starting there, and then you have standardized interfaces, meaning that parts comes together in the same way. So that means that assemble, disassemble products getting much easier for the service force as well. But another big trend now is to go from products to product as a service, meaning you take ownership of your products when they are installed out in the field, and you need to track those, and you need to have them connected products that can tell you how to improve maintenance and so on. All those efficiencies that come out there, and all those modern trends in different business models, they almost like a prerequisite assume that you have a modular assortment or a modular structure to it, because otherwise it's hard to, again, monetize or reap the benefits of
Yeah.
those scenarios.
No, that's fascinating. Yeah, that interconnectedness of service model, servitization, and personalization.
Right.
I'd love to. I mean, we've remarkably for one of our podcasts, we've kept the things pretty high level and kind of business oriented. There are just a lot of geeks in our audience. I know, me being one of them. So I'd like to make sure we save some time for the geekiness. And Tom, no offense, but we'll turn to you for the first time. This wouldn't be a modern podcast in 2025 if we didn't talk about AI, right? If we didn't talk about how AI is reshaping the way people do everything, but in particular, manage digital threads and kind of look to both, gain competitive advantage on both the top line and bottom line. What have you seeing out there? Where does AI or advanced analytics kind of fit into this subject?
It's still early, I think, is the bottom line. But and I think people are, including myself, are raising more issues of where the problems might be. In my mind, the biggest issue is how do you get good data to train on? Enterprise data is notoriously dirty, and if you just train it on your existing structures, are you going to be training AI to create errors? So how do you come up with that good training data set? But the flip side is, where else are you going to get data but from your enterprise systems? It's stored in PLM, so you've got to have strong configuration management and quality processes within your data creation, data governance, for example, to support creating that better data to train, so you don't get garbage going in. I think the biggest opportunity that we've seen so far is in the simulation world. There's a term, one vendor's term is executable digital twin, where you build your model based off a body of simulations, and simulations typically take a long time to do a numerical solution. When the AI systems reduce those many numerical simulations down to an equation, so that you can make a prediction of how a product or a piece of a product will perform without having to do the numerical simulation. It's a much reduced order mathematics. And you do that, generate that algorithm using AI, and so you can predict responses. Obviously, you got to stay within the boundaries of where simulation software is able to go beyond your current boundary. When you're using this approach, you have to stay within the envelope of the existing simulations. The benefit of that, though, is with these simplified algorithms, you're able to run these simulations in real time and integrate it into your digital thread or your processes to use AI to predict the product performance as it's being designed, like a real-time checker.
No, interesting. Matt, I'm curious how this syncs with your research on systems engineering and modular design.
Yeah, I would have given a similar answer, sort of looking forward from today. And honestly, a story comes to my mind because I remember I started out in my PLM job a long while ago, and I was thinking, well, why doesn't PLM and configuration therefore work like Google? Because that's sort of the everyday engineer's perspective, after all, especially if you look into ChatGPT or local instances of large language models, which every company has, even more so, right? So I think on a long run, it would be kind of nice to get that going. And I think there's a big contradiction in there, because if you configure, you have these standardized interfaces and they're deterministic. So somebody made them that they are like we have Lego, for example. But on the other hand, sort of these AI mechanisms, they sort of find their way around uncertain data and statistic probabilities. And honestly, I don't have an answer myself how that's going to fit one day. But personally, I hope that before I retire, I'll see the first version of a PLM configuration environment that doesn't have a product structure. That would be kind of super cool. And to give you an answer that's more concrete, I have, for example, one doctoral student, and what he does is he writes AI software to understand what functions are in a CAD model. So he tries to identify flows of force or flow of rotation through a gearbox, for example, to then deduce what are the functions of the CAD model without knowing it. And I think this is sort of how Tom's approach is going to take next steps, that we're going to see a certain configuration and we see what are the properties of the system that we just configured together, and that is sort of more than trained into the system rather than just modeled.
Yeah, no, fascinating. Johan, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that, the whole idea about AI defining the most optimal product architecture based on a number of different inputs, parameters, like, fluffy customer needs, hard engineering data, product properties, attributes, supply chain considerations, and so on. It would be fantastic if it could be done. We have not seen that yet, that type of... Obviously, there are research projects, like you say there, Matt, that is trying to get this big data analysis and reduce it through different smart graph database technology or such. But it remains to be seen. I mean, we're using AI today to get a lot of more soft data from, let's say, market survey and those type of things to really, because it's super effective to get that kind of, and you get it very good, and then you can calibrate it with the marketing product management team at the client base. So you save a lot of time by you doing that. But the specific systemic or optimization process, what is the best product architecture for a given set of circumstances, that remains to be seen, how that's going to play out.
Yeah,
I would agree.
Yeah, that would be, you can just envision kind of a next generation online configurator, right? Where someone is, I was just, looking at a car, instead of sort of going through and making a selection of these are the accessories I want, you instead say, this is what I do. This is my lifestyle. This is my preference. Right. This is, and then have a recommendation engine that would say, okay, based on all that, here's the configuration we'd recommend for you. That's very, very interesting. Cool. Great conversation. I think time for one last question, and this is a little bit off the cuff here, but looking at the world today, it could be a consumer brand, it can be more of an industrial business to business brand. Who does this really, really well, at least from an outside looking in? Who do you kind of point to and say, yeah, that company does it great, does it well?
The configurator process, you mean?
At least outside looking in, who seems to do it. I just doing some research lately, looking at Lego, right? The way Lego kind of, I think it's been over 10 years since they put on their Lego factory product online, which was actually pretty monumental if you step back and think about it. But I'm curious, who's doing it really well right now?
Well, if I, coming into Matt's point of view, the truck manufacturers, I mean, I'm a Swedish guy, so I may be arguably biased here, but Scania, the heavy truck manufacturer of Scania, has always been almost double in margin compared to other truck manufacturers, because they have had a fantastic configure-to-order process the last 20 or 30 years even. I mean, they improve it, perfect it from time to time, but that's a company that has been really good at this. I mean, they basically get scale economy into their production apparatus without having the production volume of trucks is not so great, but the actual scale or the units they use that are unique in the value stream is really high volume because of this module take rate. So I would say those are fantastic. I mean, you have personal experience with them, I guess so.
And now I need to be careful what I say, but I think Scania shows wonderfully how they do really good price enforcement and a really good market coverage with a modular product. I mean, they promote it actively. Look back into the Volkswagen group when the first platform concept came up. That is not identical, but it's sort of a similar idea. It was much younger at the time, but that was a disaster from a marketing point of view. Customers said, why should I buy an Audi if I can get a Volkswagen? And Scania shows exactly the other way around, that it actually can, if you do it right, it can be very advantageous, customers buy it, and you generate profit. So I would agree that customers in commercial vehicles are a good example. And if you look, if you want to try it out and you don't want to talk to a sales representative, you could try the Mercedes configurator for trucks, which is online and which is it's very extensive and shows a bit how complex that field is. I do think if you look a bit deeper into large machine factories in Germany, you find it to some degree, but then it's often more Excel based. I do think the German automotive industry in comparison to North American industry also shows how far you can go. From what I know is the Range Rover is currently the most complex configuration you have as a passenger car in the market, with the highest number of options and the largest variety in combinations. I would actually say in the end that Lego is not a configurable product to conclude it. I think Lego comes down more to almost what we would say machine elements. Nobody would say if I have sets of different gears and I can just plug them together, that's a configurable product. It has so much more as overall properties and behavior, and you don't have that in Lego. You just have free combining of things. You almost have no restrictions. So I would actually say Lego is not a good example.
Okay. Point taken. Tom?
Yeah, I would say the industry that we've seen that's most interesting to me is the escalator elevator industry. They've been doing configured products for decades now. My boss, Peter, has worked with several of those companies pushing 30 years ago. And the interesting thing is it's not just the product design, it's also the manufacturing and the installation, because they have to kit the installations. So that's configurable as well, depending on shipping issues and the site that they're shipping to. Things get packaged, packaging even gets configured. So and so that's more of an industrial product as opposed to an automotive-like product. So you can get some good ideas from how those companies work also.
Well, I think this is probably a good time to conclude our conversation. Let me just say that thanks very much. This was a fascinating conversation. I think we really just scratched the surface. I'd love to invite you all back. I suspect that 2025 is going to be, this is one of the hot topics out there. I suspect we'll see a lot this year. So perhaps we plan to come back together and kind of review what's worked and what hasn't. So I'd like to thank everyone who tuned in today, and please keep the conversation going online on LinkedIn using that hashtag pulling the digital thread. I'm sure that's the best place to connect with these gentlemen here. So thanks everyone. Really thought-provoking conversation.
Happy to. This was fun.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. Bye.
Cheers.